Hello, everyone. I'm Holly Thorne, the Community Relations Coordinator for the Stormwater Quality Division here at the City of Oklahoma City. I'd like to officially welcome everyone to the October edition of our 2024 webinar series. Before we begin hearing from our presenter, I'd like to provide some information to help enhance everyone's experience during today's webinar. To reduce background noise, we ask that everyone keep themselves muted during the presentation. If anyone has any questions during the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat for questions, and we will have our speaker answer as many as possible during and after the presentation. If anyone would like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, please send us a request via email. We will place my email address into the chat so you'll have it handy. Each of the presentations in this webinar series will be available within a week or so after the scheduled webinar date on our website under Stormwater Workshops. The section where these webinars are posted is called the webinar series, and today's session will of course be the October edition. We'll post a link to the website where you can find those presentations toward the end of today's session. If anyone has any questions at this time, please feel free to type them into chat now. Up next is the presentation for today's session. Today we're going to hear from Alyssa Lusk, an environmental technician for the construction section of OKC's Stormwater Quality Division. Alyssa has worked as an environmental technician in the construction section of the City of Oklahoma City Stormwater Quality Division since August of 2023. She holds an associate's degree in biology from Oklahoma City Community College and an aircraft mechanics license with a power plant rating from the FAA. As an environmental technician, Alyssa provides stormwater quality technical assistance to permit holders and engineers and conducts routine inspections of permitted sites in the southwest portion of the city. Again, if anyone has any questions during today's presentation, be sure to type them into chat. Alyssa will be available at the end of the presentation to answer any questions. Alyssa, I'll now hand the reins over to you. You may share your screen and begin your presentation.
Thank you, Holly. Let me get this sharing started. All right. So hello, everyone, and welcome to Construction Compliance Challenges. Today, I will be walking you through stormwater construction inspections, including regulations and why they're there, what we look for during an inspection, and some common issues we see during inspections, how to reach us, and frequently asked questions. Like Holly said, my name is Alyssa Lusk, and I've been with City of Oklahoma City Stormwater Quality since 2022. I'm the Stormwater Quality Construction Permitting and Auditing Inspector for the southwest sector of the city, which is a longer title in Spanish. My sector covers everything from 100-acre subdivisions and major utility and road widening projects to exterior walk-in freezers and small business parking modifications of 500 square feet. With that diversity of projects, I see many kinds of challenges acting as barriers to compliance. Sites may be varied, but often problems are common between projects, since no matter how much land you're disturbing, there are only so many ways to move and control dirt, and construction tends to consist of the same activities regardless of the size or shape of the finished product. So let's get into it. All of the city's construction stormwater regulations and the rest of the municipal code can be found online. Everything an inspector will note during an inspection comes from the municipal code. Chapter 16 covers drainage and flood control regulations. Requirements for detention, bridges and culverts, open or closed storm drainage, erosion and sediment control, and runoff calculations can be found here. Chapter 16 is not one cited often during inspections, but inspectors do refer to it, and it covers several items related to construction stormwater. Chapter 48, Soil Disturbing Activities, contains the bulk of the regulations cited during inspections. 4816, sorry, I lost my thread. Oh, that's why. 4816 covers permit requirements and procedures, including the requirement for submission of a notice of termination to close a permit, and the specific instances of land disturbance that don't require a permit. 4821 is where we find the rule to obtain a permit. If you've ever received an inspection report with corrections needed, you've probably seen portions of 4823, all the requirements for erosion and sediment control on a construction site. 4823I might be the most cited regulation for construction stormwater, the requirement for erosion and sediment control measures on a work site. Water resources, enforcement and abatement, and fines and fees are found in Chapter 57. The BMP manual is also a great resource. Not only is Municipal Code Chapter 48 reproduced there in its entirety, Section 7 contains detail sheet drawings of the most common BMPs, including concrete washout pits, construction entrances, and silt fence. And Section 8 explains hydromulching, coagulation and flocculation, and temporary above-ground storage tanks. It's available on the city's website at okc.gov, and we are currently updating it to make it better. Projects disturbing 1 acre or more are also required to obtain a permit with the State Department of Environmental Quality, or the DEQ. Those regulations are found in the OKR 10, which is also available online, along with all the forms needed to obtain the permit. Why does it keep switching? The OKR 10 is the general construction permit for the state of Oklahoma under the Oklahoma Pollution Discharge Elimination System, or OPDES. This covers construction activities where the DEQ is the permitting authority. This permit was reissued in 2022 and is reissued again every 5 years. Obtaining a permit with either the DEQ or the City of Oklahoma City doesn't mean you have a permit with the other authority. And though the city accepts the DEQ paperwork, it must be sent to both offices as the permits are separate entities. So what's the goal? Keep stormwater clean. That seems like an obvious answer, but what does it mean? So when precipitation does not soak into the ground, it flows over it as stormwater. Impervious surfaces such as pavement increase the amount of stormwater by preventing this absorption into the ground. Stormwater flows into community waterways directly and through the city's MS4, or Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, which includes city streets, ditches, storm drains, and channels. Some stormwater also soaks into the ground further downstream, contributing to groundwater resources. Stormwater picks up dirt, trash, chemicals, landscaping debris, and other contaminants as it flows over land. Any contaminants that enter the city MS4 with stormwater are not filtered or treated. Stormwater construction regulations and BMPs, or best management practices, minimize the contact stormwater has with these contaminants and help filter them out before they leave a construction site. Sediment in particular is a major contaminant associated with construction activities. Many of the stormwater regulations and BMPs specifically address sediment-laden runoff from construction sites. Together, sediment and other pollutants can cause changes in hydrology, or properties of the water, and water quality that result in habitat modification and loss, increased flooding, decreased aquatic biodiversity, and increased sedimentation and erosion. And here in this picture, whoops, I don't know why I keep switching. Here in this picture, you can see an example of sediment runoff from a site that has impacted a stream. It's created its own little sandbank there, and that's going to change both the properties of the flow of the stream, the habitat, and also it will eventually, if it keeps going, it will fill that stream in completely. So protect community waterways. The city of Oklahoma City is big. Our community contains 4 watersheds. That's Deer Creek, Deep Fork, the North Canadian, and Canadian River or South. Many major streams and tributaries, ponds, lakes, and the Canadian River. These waters belong to all of us, and one of the major goals of stormwater construction regulation and compliance is to protect these community resources from impacts related to construction, such as sediment runoff, oh my gosh, or chemical pollution. 4823G states that neighboring persons and property shall be protected from damage or loss resulting from excessive stormwater runoff, soil erosion, or deposition upon private or public property or public streets of water-transported silt and debris. Adjacent property owners shall be protected from land devaluation due to exposed bare banks. So the 3 major impacts we see from construction on neighboring properties and neighboring houses are dust, runoff and flooding, and sediment. For dust, it's not uncommon during large-scale construction projects such as subdivisions to have time between major construction activities where the site is idle. Often sites are grubbed and graded which disturbs the topsoil and leaves it friable and subject to blowing, and then left for some time waiting on availability from utility installation contractors. This is a major source of dust. Sites are required to initiate stabilization on areas where construction has ceased for 14 days or more. Sites should also implement a regular watering schedule during normal activities as a minimum dust control. The way erosion and sediment controls are implemented is also important to runoff and flooding. These controls must not direct runoff in such a way that it floods neighboring properties or causes excessive runoff to leave the property, which includes not blocking storm drains. Sediment is perhaps the most obvious impact on neighboring properties. No one wants dirt flowing into their yard or tracked into the street. Many construction BMPs are specifically aimed at preventing sediment from leaving a site. So what do we look for? To help accomplish the goal, keep stormwater clean, stormwater quality regularly inspects construction sites to identify problems, often before they become pollution. Sites are divided by the size and nature of the project into Priority 1, Priority 2, and Priority 3. Priority 1 sites disturb 1 acre or more and are inspected every 30 days. Priority 2 sites disturb less than 1 acre and are also inspected every 30 days. Priority 3 sites are demolition projects. Oh my gosh. Priority 3 sites are demolition projects and are inspected once per quarter or every 90 days. When necessary corrections are listed on an inspection, permittees have until the next inspection to correct the deficiency, unless enforcement action is issued. If a site is issued enforcement action, a time frame of 7 to 14 days to complete the correction will be specified. Stormwater quality also responds to concerns raised by residents when they are impacted by construction sites. Operators and permittees are responsible for minimizing impacts to neighboring communities and waters. We also provide guidance and answer questions regarding regulations and regulatory compliance. Remember the diversity of projects in the Southwest sector? Smaller construction projects may involve contractors who have never encountered stormwater regulations before. It's our job to know the law, explain it when necessary, and make sure it's followed. Document review is a required part of every inspection. A project's permits, inspection reports, stormwater pollution prevention plan, notice of intent, and erosion control plan must be available on site for review upon request. A digital version is acceptable. Some sites are even using QR codes now to link to digital storage. Some common problems we see, first of all, there's often no one on site at all. If there's someone on site, no one on site knows where or how to get the paperwork. The paperwork might be on site, but it's out of date or they have an expired permit posted. Site documents must be updated when permits are renewed, so you should always have the current permit located on your site. Sometimes the paperwork on site does not reflect current site conditions. These are living documents expected to be edited as needed to match site conditions. So if the responsible party changes or something gets moved, the erosion control plan or NOI or SWIP should be updated. Inspections are required to be completed by site personnel every 14 days and within 24 hours of the end of a rainfall event of a ½ inch or greater. If the site is designated as a DEQ high priority or in an area impacting aquatic resources of concern, inspections should be completed every 7 days and within 24 hours of the end of a rainfall event of ½ inch or greater. And one of the biggest things we see during document review is these inspections aren't being completed, or if they're being completed, they're not located on site. To obtain a permit, submit a notice of intent, stormwater pollution prevention plan, and erosion control plan to stormwater@okc.gov. These documents go through a review process wherein any corrections needed on the documents will be returned to the submitter. Once corrections are made and the documents are accepted, submitters will be issued an invoice for $88.75. Once this fee is paid, a permit will be issued that lasts for 1 year. Common problems or questions we see here are the site has a city permit, but it's a residential or commercial building permit, BLDR or BLDC, or something else, and it's not a land disturbing permit, which is what stormwater issues are, land disturbing permits. The site has a stormwater permit, but it's for industrial activity, not construction. The operator has been doing this for some number of years, and they have never gotten this permit. So the city of Oklahoma City began permitting construction activities in 1999. It's the law. Sometimes the site had a permit, but it's expired and they haven't renewed. If that's the case and that matches your site, call 405-297-2948, select option 3 to pay by phone, or email stormwater@okc.gov for renewal information. Coverage can also be renewed online at the Acela Citizen Access website at okc.gov. Sometimes the developer had a permit, but it was closed, and now there's no permit coverage. Or the developer has a permit currently, but the builders don't, and the developer does not want responsibility for the builder's actions. Unless the builders obtain their own permit coverage, the developer, as the permittee, is responsible for any corrections needed within their permitted area. Sometimes somebody submitted the permit documents, but to another city department or to the DEQ. If documents don't go to stormwater, there's no guarantee we get them at all. So per Municipal Code 4816G2, upon completion of construction activities, permittee must stabilize the entire site by planting, growing, and establishing a uniform perennial vegetative cover until a density of at least 70% of the native background cover has been established for all unpaved areas. When the site has been fully stabilized, permittee must submit a signed notice of termination to the director or designee for review. The B&P manual clarifies 70% to mean 70% per square foot. To transfer a permit, a notice of termination for transfer must be submitted, and the new operator must obtain permit coverage by submitting a notice of intent, stormwater pollution prevention plan, and erosion control plan, just like getting a new permit. It's the same document, but Section 4, new operator information will be filled in for a transfer and not filled in to close a permit. This is a really common issue we see on construction projects where projects are done, but they haven't been closed. And to close a permit is very much required by municipal code. So who needs a permit? 4815 defines land disturbing activities as any land change which may result in soil erosion from water and wind and the movement of sediments into community waters or onto lands and roadways within the community, including, but not limited to, clearing, dredging, grading, excavating, transporting, storing, stockpiling, mining, disposing, and filling of soil, earth and materials, or land. Further, 4816B lists all land disturbing activities not requiring a permit. And those are such minor land disturbing activities as home gardens and individual home landscaping, home repairs, home maintenance work, and other related activities which result in minor soil erosion. The construction of single-family residences when built separately on lots less than 1 acre, not within a subdivision, and they have been issued building permits, provided that excavation is limited to trenches for the foundation, basements, service and sewer connections, and minor grading for driveways, yard areas, and sidewalks, with no offsite discharge of pollutants. Individual service and sewer connections for single or two-family residences, agricultural practices involving the establishment, cultivation, or harvesting of products of the field or orchard, preparing and planting of pasture land, forestry land, management practices, including harvesting, farm ponds, dairy operations, and livestock and poultry management practices, and the construction of farm buildings. The installation, maintenance, and repair of any underground public utility lines when such activity occurs on an existing hard surface road, street, or sidewalk, provided the activity maintains pollution control and is confined to the area of the road, street, or sidewalk which is hard surfaced, and a street, curb, gutter, or sidewalk permit has been obtained, and the construction, repair, or rebuilding of tracks of a railroad company. Any activity not listed in the exceptions that is a land disturbing activity requires a permit. Often we will hear someone say, but I'm just doing this thing. I'm just doing a little bit, or I'm just piling dirt there. It requires a land disturbing permit, and the municipal code is really clear on what does and does not. 4823I states erosion and sediment control measures must be in place and functional before earth moving operations begin and must be constructed and maintained throughout the construction period. Temporary measures may be removed at the beginning of the workday, but must be replaced at the end of the workday. Some of the most common issues we find during an inspection are issues with erosion or sediment controls. Often controls are not installed until after grading has begun. This is a violation and is not the best management practice. Silt fence is often not installed correctly. The bottom edge has to be trenched in or buried, and the supporting sticks must be on the outside. Sediment controls are frequently not used correctly or in the right place or at all. Or silt fence is used when another control is better suited, such as along a curb. You might not want to have to dig that trench for the bottom edge, so you can choose another control such as silt dikes, curlex, straw wattle, something else. The municipal code doesn't specify silt fence. Or there are no erosion controls installed at all. Erosion controls and sediment controls are different things. So one of the most common problems we see here are no erosion control on sites. We see a lot of silt fence and not much else. Erosion controls help keep runoff and erosion from becoming a problem. Erosion controls include gabion baskets, which are what's pictured on the left here, riprap, erosion control matting, check dams, or other velocity dissipation. Sometimes there are insufficient controls, usually nothing to slow down the water, which will then blow through whatever is there and causes controls to fail. If sites use silt fence, they often do not install it correctly. If controls are installed, they may not be maintained. Regular maintenance is required, and maintenance issues should be identified during the requisite regular inspections conducted by site personnel. A construction entrance or exit is anywhere vehicles are entering, exiting, or accessing a project area. A construction entrance can also refer to a constructed area consisting of filter fabric laid under surge, which is 2 to 3 inch coarse aggregate rock. A minimum of 20 feet wide and 50 feet long uses the entrance per the BMP manual. Common problems here are there's no entrance installed, or the entrance is installed incorrectly with rock that's not big enough, the entrance isn't long enough, or there's no filter fabric under the rock, which is what you see here in the picture. There are engineering drawings in the BMP manual that show clearly how this should be installed. Entrances might be installed, but some contractors are using another location to enter and exit the property. Or sites are not sweeping daily. Every day there is work going on a project, they should be sweeping all of the hard surfaces around it to keep tracking to a minimum. We don't expect sites to be magic and not track dirt off. We do expect them to clean it up and minimize it. Oops. There we go. Any area disturbed during a project, whether it's within the permitted boundaries of the project or even the property lines, must be stabilized as part of that project. Permanent stabilization is 100% coverage by something other than vegetation, gravel, concrete, asphalt, etc., or at least 70% uniform coverage per square foot in perennial vegetation. Vegetative coverage is what causes the most hangups for construction sites. If the site was seeded or hydroseeded, the seed must germinate and provide 70% uniform coverage, that's 70% per square foot, before it will pass final inspection. If the site is strip sodded or covered 70%, leaving 30% bare, that is 70% coverage, but the coverage isn't uniform and that will not pass a final inspection. Occasionally, contractors disturb an area outside the site's permitted boundaries or even outside the legal property line. Any area disturbed during a project as part of or related to that project, such as driving through an area or connecting to utilities across the street, must be stabilized as part of that project. Construction is sometimes not phased correctly, with huge areas grubbed and graded and no work scheduled for months to years out. Sites must stabilize as soon as an area is idle for 14 days or more, or within 7 days if the site is designated as DEQ high priority or with an area of an aquatic resource of concern, such as the Lake Thunderbird watershed. Curlex, jute matting, straw mulch, or any kind of seed before it germinates are all temporary stabilization. These kinds of stabilization will not pass a final inspection. A site must meet the standard for permanent stabilization before a permit can be closed. Often, it makes good sense and is compliant with the municipal code to encourage sites to stabilize as they go. If you're done with an area, you can seed it and not wait for the end of the project to sod everything. Sediment is big, but it isn't the only regulated discharge. Many other construction activities, necessities, and byproducts are all potential sources of pollution. Dust concerns are some of the most numerous action-centered concerns we handle in stormwater quality construction. Some common objections to dust control are, if sites spray water for dust control, it increases tracking. That's true, and sometimes there's no help for that. But tracking is the lesser evil as it's easier to clean up and does not spread the way dust does. As an alternative to a more frequent regular spraying schedule, sites can consider polymerization, which will interact with dust particles at a molecular level and help them stick together, which weighs down that top layer of soil and reduces the frequency of spraying required. Sometimes the section of a project that is producing the most dust is not the section that is actively being worked on. But you might recall, sites must initiate stabilization as soon as an area is idle for 14 days or more, or within 7 days if the site is designated as DEQ high priority, or within an area of an aquatic resource of concern, such as Lake Thunderbird. So, portable toilets. We see a lot of portable toilets on their side. Sometimes we get told there are no holes in the feet or I can't stake it where it is. You can try sandbags on opposite corners or move it to block it and brace it with something else. But we don't want the toilets to fall over any more than construction sites do. So for fuel and other chemicals, they have to be isolated from stormwater contact. That means covered and or in secondary containment. The container should also be labeled accurately. Common problems we see is it's on a pallet, but it's not a spill containment pallet. It's just a regular pallet, and that's not secondary containment. Sometimes sites will reuse containers, and you'll hear, well, that's just water in there. If it has a diamond label on the side that says Class A corrosive, it's corrosive, and I'm going to assume it's corrosive. Containers that are reused should be labeled very clearly as just water. I've also heard we can't move them or those belong to subcontractors. Whoops. Undercover can also mean tarped if you can't move something, which is acceptable for temporary storage. Blowable, floatable trash is a big problem because this is Oklahoma and it is always windy. So we expect sites to use the dumpster to cover dumpsters when not in use. Some things I have heard on sites a lot are we did use the dumpster, but the trash blew out. Again, cover the dumpsters when it's not in use and empty containers regularly so that they don't get overfilled. I've also heard that the contractor says picking up trash is not in their contract. It's a site responsibility. So anyone associated with that site, the permittee is responsible for picking up that trash or making sure it's picked up. So washout is another big one. Some common issues we hear are, but it's water-based paint. It doesn't matter. Only pure clean water can go on the ground. Any kind of washout, concrete, paint, masonry, stucco, has to be directed to a leak-proof container or pit. There are engineering drawings for these in the BMP manual if someone's confused about how to set them up, but it literally just has to be a leak-proof container or pit. I have seen people use kiddie pools and that's compliant. Often I see masonry stations set up on the ground. They should be set on plastic or in some other kind of containment to keep their mass from the ground. I've also been asked, why does concrete washout matter if we're going to pour concrete there? Whoops. So the extra water involved in washout picks up the high pH of the lime and concrete and more readily transfers that chemical contamination into stormwater and groundwater. So even if you're going to pour concrete there, it's a little bit different when you mix in the extra water by washing it out. Also, sometimes I'll look at something and it's just a substance on the ground that is light in color. It's clearly construction related. It's clearly not stormwater, but I can't tell what it is. So I'll say something like, remove the masonry compound from the ground. And I'll get told, oh, well, that's stucco or that's drywall mud. It doesn't matter. Only pure, clean water can go on the ground. So a lot of the time, what I term things in inspection reports is non-stormwater discharge. Stormwater quality construction inspectors may be the first or only inspector a site sees depending on the size of the project, so we get a lot of questions about other required city inspections and permits. There is occasionally confusion between our permitting and the DEQs. Sites disturbing 1 acre or more require both a permit with the City of Oklahoma City and the DEQ. Permitting with one doesn't mean you have a permit with the other. Sites with an existing stormwater industrial permit that are also doing construction activity will need a land disturbing permit too. Your industrial permit won't cover it. Sometimes, if you've sent in an NOT, but we didn't get it, you may have sent it to the Department of Environmental Quality. We accept the same paperwork, but it has to be sent to the city as well. For any other problem you see, you can call the Action Center at 405-297-2535 and make anonymous complaints. So, who do I contact? We are here to answer your stormwater questions. We divide the city into six sectors. So there's an inspector for each sector. Even if that inspector, even if the inspector you've worked with before isn't in the sector you're working in now, you can call them and we'll get you the number for who to contact. You can also always contact the Stormwater Quality Main Office at 405-297-1774 or reach out to Melanie or Jimmy. But we're here to answer your questions and we're here to help. We want to get compliant together. Thank you for attending today's webinar regarding construction compliance challenges. Feel free to ask questions now or type them into chat.
Thank you, Alyssa. Great presentation. If anyone has any questions for Alyssa, be sure to type those into chat at this time. If there are any questions, Jordan, do you mind?
Absolutely. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming today. Alyssa, we do have a question for you. The question is from Sarah Terry Cobo. There we go. She is asking doesn't DEQ require dumpsters to be covered when the site is inactive?
I believe it does. I would have to look that up in the OKR 10, but we also require that.
Awesome. I have more questions, but I want to be mindful of others, so I'll hold on my next question.
We have one more question from Melanie Lawson. How often should sites implement dust control measures?
So sites should have a regular spraying schedule. They should be implementing dust control measures anytime they're out there working. And then if they're not actively working, they should have some form of stabilization down to prevent the dust from blowing off site. And then the next question, can you remind us where the BMP information is located? That BMP information can be found in the BMP manual, which is on the city's website at okc.gov. Right now we're working off the 2018 revision, but Melanie and Jimmy have been working on updating that. There is also some information in the OKR 10, although that's not specifically a city regulation. We do use that because some of their drawings are pretty good.
And that's the questions we have in chat. Sarah, if you have any additional, feel free to ask.
Yeah, just a couple more. Melanie asked one of the questions I had, but I put one in the chat just now, and then I've got one more after that.
So inspections required if rainfall is a ½ inch or greater. For my section, I use the Yukon Mesonet site because it is physically closest. Some of the other guys use Oklahoma City East, but Oklahoma City East is pretty far away from Yukon. So we use the nearest Mesonet station, but a site can also put up a rain gauge, and that's totally compliant. So yeah,
Awesome.
if it didn't rain that hard in Yukon, then I'm looking at the Yukon station and I try to be real upfront with my sites and let them know, hey, listen, this is what I'm going to be looking at. So if you come up with a different one, I'm probably not going to tell you you're wrong, just as long as you're doing the regular inspections.
Awesome. No, that's cool. I'm glad to hear that the inspectors are using the kind of like local ones, and I didn't know that rain gauges were compliant, so that's very cool.
So Jimmy asked, how long is the review process for a land disturbing activity permit? Provided people are making prompt corrections, since it's a back and forth process, it generally takes about 2 weeks. If we don't get a prompt correction back, it might take much longer.
I have one more question in there from Matthew.
So let me scroll back up to it. So enforcement tools, what enforcement tools do you use to get the site back into compliance, and how long do you give them to remedy the issues? So the first enforcement tool we have is a reinspection. So the period to remedy those issues is always going to be between 7 or 14 days, unless there is an extenuating circumstance. Some of that is up to inspector discretion. So if something is going to be a lot of physical work, or they're going to have to schedule a contractor, or it's a really big problem, I might give a site a little bit more time, ask them, hey, do you think you can get this done within 7 days, or do you need 14? If I have given a site 7 days to fix something and they call me back and they say, hey, I can't get the contractor scheduled until 9 days, is that okay? As long as the site's communicating with me and they're getting it done, that's what I'm most concerned about. I'm most concerned about with the actual compliance, not necessarily with the hard 7 to 14 days. For document problems, they get 7 days.
And then Sarah has one more question in there, and Melanie added another one as well.
Okay. So if few people install erosion control and sedimentation control measures correctly, is there another option that can ensure compliance, like requiring training in advance, or having a certified installer to do it, or having an inspector on site when it's installed? Are there other innovative solutions that you're aware of in other municipalities? So I am not personally aware of other solutions in other municipalities. I can say a lot of the problem with people not installing erosion control or sedimentation control measures correctly is they're just not reading the instructions. It's there in the BMP manual. I will tell people verbally, I will tell them in writing, I will send pictures, I'll send things from the BMP manual, and you'll still see it installed incorrectly. I'm not really sure how to make people care because that seems to be some of the problem. There's a little bit of push and pull because some of that stuff can be very expensive to install, especially silt fence. As far as having certified installers do it, a lot of sites do have certified installers do it, but there's like a weird middle ground. Really big operations will have a certified installer. They know who to call, they know who to contact. If people are working with one of the companies that prepares the paperwork for them, they'll usually have somebody to call. But we get a lot of questions from smaller sites about, well, who can I call to do that? And I have to tell them Google search terms because we're not allowed to tell them because we work for the city. The cost of a reinspection is the same as the cost of the initial permit. It's $88.75 every time I have to go back out there until the issue is corrected. So if I issue a reinspect fee of $88.75 and I go back out and the issue for which I issued a reinspect fee is not corrected, the site's still not compliant, or they have more other problems, they are probably going to get another $88.75 fee. Claudia asked, do you request stormwater pollution prevention plans when you go out and do inspections to see if they're inspecting their site at appropriate intervals? So that's not found in the SWIP. Those are actually separate inspection reports. Although I believe in the OKR 10 version of the SWIP, they have the inspection forms. It's kind of a generalized form that you can modify to fit your site conditions. So they typically will keep it in a binder, or I've had sites doing QR codes. if a site is obviously not compliant, that's the first thing I'm going to ask them for is their inspection reports, because they should be looking at it and they should be catching these things. But if there's nobody on site, if there's nobody to ask, if it's like one house being built in a subdivision, sometimes we can't get that information, and I will ask but maybe never see it. So I do ask for it. I do ask to see people's paperwork. It just kind of depends on what's going on the site, whether or not we get it. And some sites are really good and have it up front and are very communicative, and some sites I've never seen another human being there. So if project disturbance is outside the limits of the erosion control plan, what should they do? So that's the same thing as outside the permitted limits of disturbance. Sites should update their erosion control plan and also likely their SWIP and NOI. So it may change the acreage that they've declared. So if it changes the acreage, they're going to have to update all three of those documents. The erosion control plan is a site map. So the erosion control plan should be updated to reflect that information. And then they need to send it to stormwater@okc.gov or to their inspector so we can update the site paperwork.
Wow, thanks everybody for all the fantastic questions. Okay. Oh, another question popped in from Sarah, Alyssa.
So the city of Norman is using signs and they have helpful information on them with the WR code. I have never seen those. I'll have to ask the city of Norman about that. We do a little bit of work with the city of Norman because they're just a neighboring entity, and so we talk to them a lot, and I will have to find out.
Okay. I don't see any additional questions right now. I do want to expand on something that Alyssa mentioned earlier. With Oklahoma City, if you see anything that you would like to report on an anonymous basis, to call our Action Center. She mentioned that you can call, but the Action Center is actually trying to make it as easy as possible for everybody to make these reports. So you can text, you can email, you can call. We also have a city app that residents can use, and I believe you can even do it over social media. I think that's Twitter. I think that's the one that they have that set up on. So there are a lot of different ways that you can submit these reports to the City of OKC Action Center. Not a lot of people are aware of all those other options, but there's a lot more than just the phone number.
And the nice thing about the Action Center, like theoretically, you can report a problem directly to your inspector and we'll go out there. The Action Center creates a paper trail. So the Action Center is really nice for that paper trail because then we have a complaint number that people can refer to get updates automatically, because anything that we update on the Action Center goes into that database and people can look at it. And it also helps keep it straight, so I can put in an inspection report. This inspection is being conducted as an extra inspection outside of your regular monthly inspections because we got an Action Center complaint.
Okay, Holly, I think that's all our questions for now.
Okay, well, perfect. Remember, if anyone would like to receive a certificate of attendance for today's presentation, please send us an email to request it. I'm placing my email again into chat. Please don't request certificates in the chat because we may not have your email address linked to your username on Teams. I will send out those certificates next week. Okay, as we've mentioned, a recording of today's presentation should be available on our website in the next week or so, and I will put the website link into the chat for you now. If anyone still needs to register for either the 2024 webinar series or our quarterly e-newsletter, please reach out to us and I'll be happy to provide you with that information. Does look like we don't have any further questions, so thank you all for attending today's session. We hope everyone enjoyed the presentation and are continuing to enjoy our webinar series. We would love to receive your feedback, so please complete our brief survey by scanning the QR code now shown on your screen. Your next webinar session is scheduled for December 17th, featuring guest speaker David Scuotas. I think I'm saying it right. With the Mile High Flood District in Lakewood, Colorado, with his presentation titled Designing with Nature. We hope everyone can tune in again in December for our last webinar of 2024. Have a great afternoon.